Well, hello, and thanks for having me. I'm Richard David Houff. We have three questions. One about being a bluesman. Now, that's pretty interesting. Basically, it was a fluke, I think, but we'll get into that. Uh, our family is very musical. Um, I studied classical guitar for 5 years. Was bored, just terribly bored. I love classical music, but there was no improvisation, nothing. And one night, my brother and me were playing with an AM radio, and we got a station out of Little Rock, Arkansas, that played blues. We didn't know what it was. But I looked at him and I said, Larry, I want to be just like this. I want to be one of these guys. Well, after some research and ordering records from a place called Paula, I think Bob Dylan actually ordered from their catalog. The albums were $1 a piece. I discovered all these cool people, Lightning Hopkins, everybody, and I'd imitate what I heard. And of course, I was unsophisticated. I found myself eventually on the West Bank at the Scholar Coffee House primarily. And Leo Kottke would play every Friday and Saturday, a 12-string. And by then I was playing, in my teens now, you gotta remember. And it was $1 a night to get in, which is unbelievable. But I'd never seen anything quite like that. And it was something that I was leaning towards experimental guitar. I didn't have the opportunity at that point in time, but in 1968, again, in my teens, I met John Fahey, who would come into my life later and was a huge influence on improvisation, something that I always wanted to do. But how I got involved in blues, I was going to the University of Wisconsin and working down in Madison. And growing up, we were surrounded by thousands and thousands of books, and which I consider, my education. But also fishing poles. I had an old Stella guitar. I'd take it fishing with me. Lived right on Monona Bay in Madison, and I'd go fishing by this railroad trestle and a little dugout area, very quiet. And one day I was down there, I was playing slide on this Stella. I had it set up, where I could do that. And I was just playing. I can't even remember what song I was playing. It wasn't a Muddy Waters song or anything like that, but I just can't remember. Here this black guy is looking at me from up above, on the tracks. He's staring down at me, and he come walking down and he goes, "Now, how did a white boy like you ever learn how to play our music?" And I says, "Well, I consider the music everybody's music. And who the hell are you?" And he laughed and laughed and laughed. He says, "It is everybody's music." And then I recognized me. It was Luther Allison. And, he says, "How would you like to be in my band?" And I went, "Well, geez, I don't know. What do I have to do?" And he says, "Well, you'd play rhythm and slide. I like to have a rhythm and slide player once in a while. It's usually me and a bass and a drummer. But, I don't like playing slide." And I went, "My God, this guy really plays good slide." I owned 4 records at that point. But I said okay, and the rest is history. We're on and off again playing, in Europe and everywhere, for God, 20 years at least. But it led me into, other people like, Albert Collins. I worked with him. Um, Worked with so many good people, but backtracking, on what really, really hooked us, hooked me and my brother, permanently, was it only cost $14.95 to take the train to Chicago, and Maxwell Street was still alive, and it was going to come to a screeching halt, and so they still had a vibrant music scene. Now, this is when we were living at home. I was 15 years old, wearing a suit and bow tie and carrying a guitar and hoping that some brothers would teach me some good music. And I got to see most of my heroes. I never got to see Robert Nighthawk, but I met a lot of people, Junior Wells, all these guys, on the street. And it was wonderful, and they treated us just as good as could be. It was just wonderful. And that's basically then up to Luther. That's how it all started. And, he always knew that I was interested in solo music and experimenting outside the boundaries, and that brought in other people that, there's a little bit of blues, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of everything going on with the guitar solo. But I still never left the blues. I played up until Luther passed away, and then it was strictly solo. I did some stuff with John Hammond, people like that. But okay, now the writing thing is very peculiar. It's a friendship with Charles Bukowski. Now that's totally bizarre. I must have been hyperactive because I was all over the country, as a kid. Back then, you could actually do that. You didn't have to worry. The crime wasn't like, you didn't have to worry about hitchhiking or anything, but I was with an old friend, Cal Coyote, another really good musician, unsung hero. We found ourselves in we're driving a 59 Bel Air Chevy and landed in LA. And I started noticing memeos. There are free papers everywhere, like the LA Free Press, stuff like that. And being a voracious reader, and the influences will come up, But at that time, I think I was reading T.S. Eliot. Now, here's a hell of a combination. T.S. Eliot and Kenneth Patchen. Well, Kenneth Patchen really, spoke to my soul. And I went, God, I want to be a writer. But again, I have a lot of years to go. I'm still a kid. And, but I got an idea for like a journalistic endeavor with these memeos, and that's how Charles Bukowski comes in. We were in a junk shop, and they had a bowl of old photographs. And I used to buy them for 10 cents a piece. They're forgotten people, antique photos. And I called them my pet souls. I always felt bad that there'd be these photos. Well, I found one that reminded me of an aunt, my godmother, in fact, looked just like a man, meaner than hell, wore horn-rimmed glasses, and the picture was just struck me, in a funny way. And I came up with an idea, and it was pretty good for a kid. I went, there's so much satire in the LA Free Press. And we were reading Charles Bukowski. Didn't know who he was. He had a column called Notes from a Dirty Old Man, which became a book with City Lights. However, I took this picture and approached Memio and says, I'd like to do something with this. I would like to write some satire called Good, or no, not Good, but Bad LSD in the Valley. It was kind of a thing in LA to pick on people in the Valley because, Orange County, there's a lot of money, and we didn't, of course, come from that. And I was going to call myself Mrs. Lillian Teasdale. The last name Teasdale I borrowed from a Marx Brothers film. At any rate, I broached this idea, and he says, yeah, we'll give it a try. Well, I wrote these horrific, vulgar, articles on all this bad LSD that's floating around. Well, it really took hold. Mothers and dads and concerned citizens in Orange County were going, oh my God, little Johnny's killing himself on this horrible LSD. And I'd make up formulas and strange concoctions for these various acids. And, well, the letters started piling in. And Bukowski happened to be writing in a lot of these memoirs, and we bumped into him one day, and I went, it was like Beavis and Butthead, that's how young we were. I went, oh yeah, there's that cool guy that writes notes from a dirty old man. Well, he hated us. I mean, he hated kids. He even wrote about us, and how much he despised kids. And I thought, well, gee, I don't like him at all, But he must have been reading some of the crap that I was writing, and it was junk. And I don't know if he was getting a laugh out of it, but I was stirring up trouble. And, talk about censorship. I mean, I got axed there, but how our friendship developed was later. And I never talked about our friendship because, especially after his death, there were so many posers and imitators and people going, oh, Bukowski's God and this and that. And I'm going, I was never a fan of Charles, but we did become friendly. I started a magazine when I, got back to the Midwest, and of course I had matured and I was much older, and I had a book out. So I was in my 20s and playing blues and writing and juggling all this stuff. It was cool, but you have that manic energy, and I enjoyed it very much. But the first magazine was called Century's End. Well, I started to get submissions from him, and I went, there's that jerk Bukowski, I should give him a big fat rejection slip, because he's not a cool guy, And I started to read, the submissions, and I went, wait a minute. Even though I'm not a huge fan, this isn't too bad. I think I'll publish a few things, and it'll probably be good for the magazines. And ironically, he remembered me after all those years, and I don't understand that, because he was pickled a lot, I mean, he's a heavy boozer. And, but he remembered me. And he says, well, at least you developed into less of a creep. That's how we started. And then a few trips to LA and stuff like that. And I seen another side of him that was pretty good, but I never, ever talked about it. There were too many posers, there was too many imitators, there still are after all these years. So I don't even bring it up. This is basically with a few friends I've talked about him in this interview. But I ended up liking him. But he wasn't an influence. Now, poetry influences, there's my God, early, as a kid, that's what changed me into a writer, is picking up Kenneth Patchen. A neighbor kid in our neighborhood, if you read poetry, you might get beat up. That's the generation I come from, for being a freak. He had a back pocket book from City Lights. I think it was Patchen's Love Poems. And in that, I read a poem called 23rd Street Runs into Heaven, and I recognized that poverty, that horrible aloneness, but yet there's somebody there that you love, and that makes it all worthwhile. I read that, and I says, no matter what I do, I have to write. But later on, influences came. A mentor of mine was Tom Clark. He's gone now, but he really helped my writing career a lot. I had a book that became text. I got invited out to Berkeley and different places to read, and several other people that were, well, I'm still friends with, Charles Bukowski. I met him, ironically in San Francisco while I was reading his book, Last of the Moccasins. He had an impact on me. But Tom Clark, we had similarities in writing, and we're both lyrical. However, at the same time, I was trying to discover a new style of writing, something that I could mix with that, and I called them story poems. Robert Bly hated them, when I showed them to him, but he liked my lyrical stuff. But I really, really worked hard on these, and now I'm getting a lot of attention from them in the mix. It's great. What I have going now is, what I'm working on currently. I have a finished manuscript of what I'm talking about, story poems and lyrical, and they're thematic. They go all the way to the end. I haven't sent it out yet. I've been looking at it for about a year. I'm kind of a perfectionist, especially with writing. There's nothing worse than a horribly edited book. That comes from being a magazine and book publisher myself. But yeah, that's in the works, and another one that's in the works is short stories. I've been accumulating them, and then recently I've decided on some memoirs. Now, the memoir is going to be really, people will read it when it's done and go, oh my God, I can't believe this guy is for real. This has got to be entirely made up. Unfortunately, it won't be made up. But that's about where I'm at right now. I've had 3 recent books of poems published. One in the Czech Republic, which was really neat. It was called Dancing on Rooftops, and something that I used to do in New York. When I was out there, dance on a rooftop, listen for that lonely sax down the street. And with that, it's over and out. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.